program update. Mark Lambert stays there. Welcome, is it Christiane and Donald? I'll leave you to do the introductions, Mark. And this is the future plans to remove level crossings on Auckland Metro Rail Network.
So thank you, Chair. Just to introduce Damien Flynn and Donald Green from our rail team. Christian is otherwise engaged with his French accent. The purpose of this paper is really to update the committee on our approach that's been taken to all level crossings in the Auckland Metro network. There were, I say were, 52 at-grade crossing points across the rail network, and with an increase in service levels across the train network over the coming, and again, emphasis to 20 years, the frequency of rail crossing barrier arms at those at-grade crossings will increase. This creates both a reduction in the efficiency of the local road network and also increases safety risk as people get frustrated with the amount of time barrier arms are down and potentially try and navigate them. Over the time, we are talking about, we are proposing full removal of all at-grade crossings. Now that does not mean road closures or pedestrian closures. It could mean that, but it could also mean underpasses, bridges, and we haven't done all the work yet, and it's a significant amount of work to look at every single level crossing to come up with the best solution. So the purpose of this presentation is really to give you an overview over the next 10, 20 years, subject to funding, of what we should be doing and what could be possible. So there's 52. CRL is already removing 3 as part of their funded and construction works. We are proposing a further 7 to be removed for day 1 opening of CRL. That leaves 42, which is a currently unfunded programme. We believe that programme is in the order of $3 billion over 10 to 20 years. It's a massive programme, but other cities around the world are doing this. Melbourne has set up its own SPV to deliver this over, I believe, around 70 level crossings, and it's in the billions of dollars. So this is very early work in terms of a long programme of work. I'll ask Damien to fly through some of the presentation and mostly take it as read. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, and kia ora tātou. The first slide I will skip over because it's more of a summary. We can come back to that if we've got time. Overview of crossings. As you'll be aware, level crossings are a point of interface between large heavy rail vehicles and other road users, pedestrians and cyclists, and they create a risk of harm, a risk of collision. They also create inefficiencies, not just on the rail network because trains have to slow down, but on the wider transport network as road users, pedestrians, cyclists need to wait for barriers to raise again. That in turn creates congestion, high emissions. As Mark said, there's 49 crossings on the network, 3 have been removed by CRL, and all of those crossings have the highest level of protection. The vehicle crossings have the highest level of protection that we currently employ in this country, which is half-arm barriers and flashing lights and bells. So we need to start removing them. Removing can be by closure or grade separation. It doesn't mean close them all. But funding for the full removal program has yet to be confirmed, and our current focus is on mitigating risk for CRL day 1. A bit of the incident history. I think the sad reality is people are harmed at these locations, and there's many more near misses than actual harm. Which emphasises why we need to do something, and Auckland Transport, Kia Rail want to do everything we can to not just reduce the risk but eliminate it, and that's by removing the crossings altogether. Why do we need to act now? So I think you're all aware CRL will be completed soon, and that enables us to increase the number of train movements on the network. Kia Rail are also planning to move more freight on the network, which increases the risk at crossings and will lead to more frequent barrier closures and more congestion. There's a formal process underway with the safety case holders, which is Auckland One Rail and Kiva Rail, to assess the detailed CRL timetable and take that through the regulatory process. And we have versions of the timetable in development that can further mitigate risk if we need to and still enable frequency increases. Next slide, a lot of numbers. It's sort of an indicative analysis of potential impact of some road crossings. Shows that with frequency increases of trains, barrier arm downtimes may increase from about half of the peak hour to around about 75% with the next timetable. And then if you look further ahead, that just gets worse. So it's safe to say we would be limited in what we can do after CRL opens if these crossings aren't removed. Mitigations, what are we doing now? There's a program nearing completion to gate all of the pedestrian crossings. That means that the gates automatically lock when the barrier arms go down. 3 crossings have been removed by CRL already, which is the difference between the 52 and the 49 that you've heard. And we're looking at removing Church Street East level crossing, which is the last crossing in the inner network. 5 pedestrian crossing removals are under investigation. They're crossings that aren't connected to a road, so it's sort of a little bit easier to do than a full road removal. And we're grade separating Homai station access. We're also doing risk assessments, updating to the latest risk assessment model that Kiva Rail has, which will identify any other mitigations that are feasible. Also underway is a detailed business case for removal of the next highest priority crossings, which are a grouping of 4 crossings in Takanini, and that's being progressed by the Supporting Growth Alliance. As we'll see next, we're working on the business case for the longer term program. In terms of the longer term program, we're working with Kiva Rail and other stakeholders on a Moka Kotahi business case to define the program for removing them all over a period of time. Any delivery program would need to be progressed jointly with Kiva Rail. As I've said, the southern line crossings at Takanini is the first grouping of crossings that we would look at removing, and the most progress has been made. How are we prioritising removal? There's been a number of assessments in the past that are primarily risk-based, but we would be reprioritising everything through the business case process, looking at risk, looking at feasibility and constructability. There may be cases where we need to keep crossings open to enable adjacent crossings to be removed before we can remove other ones. And there are broad prioritisations that have been developed from earlier work. This is more about option assessment than prioritisation. So what were we doing at each location to assess the options for removal, either closure or grade separation? Each crossing will be assessed in terms of with a multi-criteria assessment, primarily looking at safety, but looking at the impact on the transport network as a whole. Importantly, community impacts, community severance, value for money, and then other opportunities for urban realm improvements and linkages with other related projects. Funding, I think this has been canvassed in previous discussions, so I won't labour the point. Current estimates put the entire program at around about $3 billion. 1.3 billion of that is in the current 10-year program, which is unfunded. 600 million of that is identified for Takanini. And the current provision we have is around about 63 to progress Group 1 only. So there is a significant funding gap, a significant issue for Auckland that needs to be progressed at a national level. Next steps, as I've said, our current focus is on day 1 mitigations, as well as progressing the business case for that first group in Takanini, and also the program business case for the entire removal program. and engaging with the safety case holders and the regulator on the detail of the CRL Day 1 timetable, and that's happening whilst funding discussions progress. And that's the end.
Thank you, gentlemen. Open it up for questions now. I've already got some up there. Councillors Simpson, Henderson, Walker and Newman.
Thanks, Chair. My first question is actually from the Mayor. He left it, he had to go, sorry. And he asks, only one further road grade separation will be undertaken prior to CRL opening. Does this mean that train frequency post CRL opening will be lower than anticipated?
Yes and no. We are putting in place a timetable which will have the frequencies in the network, and we are currently have a mitigation around, in particular, which crossing was it? Church Street East. If we aren't able to remove that, then there could be an implication there. But the intention right now is to have the frequencies in place as intended.
Right, because my question was around the regulator, you know, the regulation. Look, I know that a lot of people don't want them. I can understand that. They're convenient. You know, I've got Newmarket on my shoulder, listening in my ear why I say this question. But at what point would the regulator turn around and say, actually, you have to do this? Is that something that...
That's a very, that's a very good question. We are engaging, obviously, with the regulator leading up to CRL Day 1. We've engaged with the regulator on all timetable changes over the last decade. It's not a black and white answer, only the regulator can really answer that. We're taking a risk-based approach across the whole network to reduce the risk as much as we possibly can for Day 1. Ultimately, the regulator has to sign that off, and ultimately the regulator has to sign off the safety cases for the rail operator, AOR, and also QRL, and be comfortable that the risk has been adequately mitigated. So I know that's probably a bureaucratic answer, but right now I can't sit here and say that the regulator will absolutely accept what we're proposing. But we're in extended discussions and we're trying to get an answer on that as soon as we can.
Thanks. Chair, question for you. Sorry, John. Sorry, question for you. Based on that answer, you might like to see if the regulator might come and have a chat with us. Because I thought this is actually kind of really important, isn't it? I mean, on one hand, you've got a whole bunch of people in the community saying, please do not stop this. This is so important to how we move and get around. And on the other hand, you may have a regulator that says, actually, if you don't do it, you can't operate. And we've spent, how much? $5 billion on something that isn't going to work, you know? So it might be, if you're unsure and you don't know, it might be a really good opportunity to get the regulator in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I see Barry's made a note of that. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair, and your forbearance because I have questions relating to my ward, and it's not always a good thing. But yeah, first and foremost, can I just at a general level ask, how is the decision made? Can we make that clear in terms of removing versus upgrading and making safe?
All of the crossings, vehicle crossings in Auckland are at the highest level of protection that we can currently use. So they're all safe.
Right.
The next step is removal.
Right, okay. We've got two among the six that are, you know, extremely controversial in the communities there. O'Neill's Road in Swanson and obviously the Corbin Estate one in Henderson. Starting with the Henderson one, there's about 70 houses that live on Winery Way there. If you were to close off that crossing, I don't know how they get to their houses. So I don't know if you've got the level of detail to answer the question, but you know, is there anything that you could offer in terms of that one?
I mean, we certainly can't stop people accessing their properties. The options are to provide alternative access. We can provide more detail on the options that are being assessed.
Yeah, thanks. I'd probably want more detail on the O'Neills as well. So I think as a way forward, Chair, maybe if we get together, so myself, the local board chairs and you guys to yarn about those two projects because they're incredibly controversial. Well, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Have we considered using the climate action targeted rate for funding this? The reason I ask this is obviously it's going to dramatically enhance the speed of the trains. It's going to enhance mobility on the part of cyclists and pedestrians, buses, and obviously also vehicles. I would have thought there was a good case there, maybe better than some of the other stuff we're funding.
That's probably a little bit difficult for me to answer because the targeted rate, as I understand it, is very focused on specific interventions and specific projects. To change those would need to come back to here and obviously need a decision to change that. But in terms of, you made a point around speed of trains. Closing these crossings doesn't necessarily increase the speed of trains.
Sorry,
it's about the broader road network and things like that.
Okay. Is it possible for us to come back, because we're going through a long-term plan, we've got the opportunity to reassess the climate action targeted rate. I would have thought there was a good case here, and this is urgent. Thank you.
Councillor Newman.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I'm just wondering about how I presume that you'd be wanting at least a 50% contribution from central government for the capital cost of these, of each of the tranches of grade separation. What sort of advice and what sort of resolution are you seeking from Cabinet when advice goes up? Because I'm assuming they would understand that there is a cost share because this is all related to the CRL.
There's a bit of history around that question. So the funding for all of this programme broadly has been included in previous versions of ATAP. And there was assumptions made, so this is not new, so it's been included in ATAP. Assumptions were made at the time that a lot of this programme would be 100% central government funded. That hasn't transpired. Therefore, if you take the, let's say, traditional approach, then you'd expect any capital investment to attract 51% government funding. But that's a broader conversation with central government through your LTP, through the RLTP process.
And so who leads the advice and the debate around that? Because I know that Auckland Transport is a requiring authority for the designation, that is a requirement for the land, that you've got to do that work, but presumably we're proceeding on the basis of some sort of agreement around a cost share.
At the moment, we are progressing this through the LTP process, and I think that's a conversation which will be needed to have around this table, and how you wish to propose funding applications, potentially, to government beyond what you already have.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I've got quite a few questions on this, so happy if some of them need to be a separate conversation, but let's see how we go, I guess. The options here of closure or grade separation, and you've indicated that the vehicle crossings we already have are at the highest safety level. We've got a number of pedestrian-only crossings, though, which are not necessarily already at the highest safety level, do not necessarily have mazes or locked gates, I don't think. So why are we, I guess, I struggle a little bit with why we're prioritising some of the pedestrian ones. Why are they in the first tranche? Why aren't we focusing on the vehicle ones first?
The first tranche includes those 5 standalone pedestrians, so they're the ones we're doing first. And we're completing a program of gating the remaining pedestrian crossings that don't have them with mazes and gates. So everything is being brought up to that higher standard.
But there are some pedestrian crossings that are proposed for removal.
Yes.
Yes. So how have you identified that removal is justified? It just sort of seems to me, I mean, I guess I'm particularly thinking of Lloyd Ave. I don't understand why that's become such a high priority one to remove, because it doesn't even make that list of the percentages of times that the gates would be shut due to trains going through. that, you know, that breakdown that's got the percentages of times and they get worse and worse as the CRL goes to full operation. Lloyd Ave doesn't even make that.
That was a list of the vehicle crossings for the various times. To clarify, removal doesn't necessarily mean close. It's close all grade separate. So there may still be a crossing at that location, just not at grade.
Okay, so the proposal for the community is total closure. There's no grade separation proposed there. Okay, so maybe if I move back a little bit from the specifics of that one and maybe we try and have a conversation about that one offline. So we have in ATAP 2021 to 2023, there was 220 million there for level crossing removals, and you've put up a slide that tells us that money doesn't appear on it. So what's happened to that 220 million from ATAP?
From memory, that 220 was the cost at that time of the Takanini groupings, so we're still working on it. My understanding was that, as Mark has said, there was an assumption in ATAP of 100% funding, and that wasn't committed, it wasn't confirmed thereafter.
Okay, I think there might have been some mixed messages on that 220 million over time over what it would fund. At an earlier point, there was information that it would more than fund Takanini, and therefore some might be available for the Western Line. So has that changed? Can we get some clarity on that?
We'd have to go back, so I can't remember the detail around that, but we can come back to you on that.
Okay. So in terms of the funding issue, I mean, it's quite frustrating. We've got this situation. This is probably more in comment now, Chair, so I'll come back to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ferry, Councillor Hills and Fletcher.
Kia ora, thanks, Chair. And I think it's maybe hard to see what the words mean in reality. So my questions might need a different briefing, but just again, maybe it's more a comment if you're considering it. Are you considering a wider network of what these changes will do and how you could prevent them? So VKT, emissions, safety, it might be a really popular walkway which is used by school kids or families, but actually it's going to mean a 5K drive now. So are you thinking of a level of prioritisation that is around what a community use is or what that might do? And it might be doing cycle lanes or footpaths to a different crossing and making the actual vehicle crossing safer for those users if you have to close too close by pedestrian crossing. I'm just wanting to know how you're deciding the overall piece of what that looks like, and obviously you have to work with the community on that. But.
Yes, I mean, there's lots of criteria we'll be considering on a case-by-case basis, so all options will be considered. We'll be engaged with the community. Things like community severance will be a key part of that criteria as well, as to what options we have. Are there alternatives which are 100 metres extended walk versus 5 kilometres or something? So all of that will be looked at on a case-by-case basis for each crossing. We've only started doing that for the Group 1 and the Takanini crossings. We need to do all of that for the rest of the programme as well.
Councillor Fletcher, you're the last.
Oh, thank you. I think we've heard previously on many occasions when questions have come up around grade separation that there was always going to be a great big price tag, but the assumption had been, and certainly I know Mike Lee's not here at the moment, but at the time the Board of Auckland Transport were pushing forward with the CRL and at the government of the day, the assumption was that this would be funded by central government. So it's very disheartening when you start to look at what has to be a priority for the investment that we've put into the CRL. I think this needs a lot more detailed analysis. It's going to be controversial, and I wondered whether you would entertain the idea of actually having a workshop on it so we can do a bit of a deep dive into what these priorities can be, and on the matter that Councillor Henderson raised, that we can actually start looking at alternatives so that we can actually give some comfort to our communities that we have been able to work through this in a constructive way, but I'm sorry that the Mayor is not here, because this has to be a matter for advocacy to central government. And right now, I would hope that all of the political parties are coming to understand that this has to happen, and we need their support on it.
I'll just pass over to Barry Potter for a comment there, Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Look, a good suggestion, and I've picked that one up, so thanks for raising it. We'll book that, we'll organise something. It'll take a little bit to set it up, because we do need Whakatahi to be part of that discussion as well, of course, as a regulator and so forth, but we'll work on that and get that in people's agenda. It might be out a little, maybe October, late October, November or something like that. We'll look at a time.
The problem's not going away.
No, it's not, no.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. If you, Mark, you want to say something?
Yeah, if I could just quickly respond, Councillor Fletcher, as well. We are in the process of preparing a programme business case to go into that next level of detail across the whole programme, which will obviously work through Barry and the Council on. And this is also being put into the overall rail network programme business case for the next 30 years as well. So it's part of that. So working very closely with KiwiRail as well on that.
Thank you for the presentation. Could I have someone to move and second it? Move second, and Councillor Ferry, you wanted to speak briefly to it.
I guess I just wanted to express some of my frustration on this issue. We have known for a while that this was coming, and I remember sitting there at the briefing on ATAP, and Graham East sitting, I think, behind me or close to me, and we were both anticipating that there wouldn't be anything in there for grade separation, and indeed there was a nice surprise. But now it hasn't panned out, and 220 million has ended up to be not only not enough, but also we've had some mixed advice about what it was or wasn't being used for. There's a lot of frustration in the community about this, and more to come. I think Councillor Henderson, Fletcher and I, maybe Councillor Turner too, we've been dealing with some in that first 7, but you know, there's 42 more to come. And we can't be sort of fighting this site by site and having these conversations each time. So I'm frustrated that the draft GPS refers to level crossings but says nothing about funding. I'm also frustrated that I asked for level crossings to be included in the Mayor's manifesto and the deal for Auckland in terms of that central government advocacy, and it's not. So, yeah, I guess I just want to underscore how much work we have to do in this space, and that I hope all my colleagues are keen to work together to get this over the line sooner rather than later. Thanks.
All right, thanks for those comments. Well made. Kate, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. And just thank you, Councillor Fletcher, as well. I think makes a fantastic point. A workshop would be really appropriate. And yeah, if we can fit the time in, because that's always hard. But yeah, look, just briefly, I want to give a shout out to the residents, especially around O'Neill's Road and Swanson, that have been really tireless in their advocacy and have worked together a bit of a lobby group that have been going around for a matter of months to raise the issues on this situation where they may not necessarily have been so visible in the day-to-day work of council. So this is exactly democracy at work, and it's a beautiful thing, and I'm really thankful that they have contacted myself and others to talk about this. For O'Neill's and for Henderson, I think that for both of them, we really need to look again at grade separation. Now, it is in my ward, but I'll just briefly outline it, that O'Neill's Road is a pedestrian crossing, which if one were to just put a fence up, then you'd have to walk around, I'd say probably at least a 20-minute walk around Swanson to get to the other side, and people are just going to jump the fence, right? And it seems to me, I don't know how much these things cost, but it seems that electronic gates to let people through would be a cheap option that would work, that would be safe. It works in other areas very well safely. and would actually help people be safer than jumping a fence, which is what I think people would do. Corbin's even more alarming. Now, this is closing off a little lane called Mount Lebanon Lane, which is actually the only vehicle access to about 70 houses in Henderson, and also the Corbin Estate Arts Centre, which is our regional arts thing, which is massive and beautiful, and I'd encourage everyone to come and have a look while you can, because if we do just put a fence up, you won't be able to get through to these places. They've got no idea how someone is going to live on the street. What I've been told is that the proposal is to use a bridge which currently doesn't exist, something that I've been lobbying for a number of years, but is pedestrian only and is consented as such, right? So I don't know how it's going to work. I'm really thankful that staff have agreed to kind of meet to discuss these issues, and maybe I've got the wrong end of the stick somewhere along the line, I don't know. But we'll have a good yarn and we'll thrash it out and see if we can get mitigation in place. I think that'd be a good outcome for the community, and I really want to thank staff for their openness in that. Thanks, Chair.
Right, thanks, Councillor Henderson. So it's been moved, Councillor Dalton.
All right, Chair, I'll be really quick. Just to support these comments that have been made, this is a real impact on community, and Takanini is quite a way down the track in terms of notice of requirements going in, and what we have is an area that probably doesn't actually understand the impact of what's going to happen to their environment in which they live, and this is where urban design is so important to ensure that communities are connected for the future, because these projects are forever projects. And I would just recommend Councillor Henderson and others that you really do nail down what is the best urban design for your areas, and that they are connected as much as they can be into the Support and Growth Alliance consultations. There's a lot of detail in them, and sometimes that gets missed a bit, and it's too hard and it's too far away because the projects are years away for a lot of them. So it's a huge impact, and just commending the community and businesses that have tried so hard to get a good outcome for Walters Road. And reading the AT board paper for next Tuesday, it doesn't look like they've won that one, and that's going to be a shame because a good urban outcome is required for that community of Takanini with such a beautiful shopping area that's been invested in, new community, new houses, about to be divided by a bridge they didn't want. Kia ora. Thank you, Chair.
Right, move Ferry, seconded Fletcher. Although noting the progress on the level crossings program, and of course noting that Barry has picked up some of the suggestions there. All those in favour? Against? Carry. Just at this stage, we'll move an extension of time. Move by Chris Fletcher, seconded by me. Hopefully that extension isn't too lengthy. We're up at 10 to 4 already, and we'll call up, and that's obviously in our hands as always. We're calling up. Yeah, no, I think we put it to the vote, didn't we? Happy to move it, Chair. No. Sorry, I thought you did. Yeah, we've removed it. So you put it to the vote. Yeah. Yes, carried. So the next item, 18.